Today's topic on Weekend Connection here on the Bible Broadcasting Network is mental health. My guest today is Joe Padilla. He's the founder, president, and chief executive officer of an organization called the Grace Alliance, and they're based in Waco, Texas. So let's get connected today with Joe Padilla. Good afternoon, my friend. I welcome you to Weekend Connection here on the Bible Broadcasting Network. And today I have as my guest Joe Padilla from just outside of Waco, Texas. And he is with the Grace Alliance. Joe, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
I appreciate you joining me for Weekend Connection. And today's topic is mental health and ways the church at large is addressing mental health issues and ways the church can further address mental health issues. Joe, before we launch into that, just tell me and tell our BBN listeners a little bit about yourself and how Grace Alliance got started.
Sure. I am the co-founder and CEO of the Grace Alliance, which is Mental Health Grace Alliance. And that is a mental health recovery and support organization that works with the church and anybody that's in this journey looking for mental health recovery and that type of support. Now, I didn't get into this because this was our dream and this is what we wanted to do. However, this was something that we walked into just by happenstance. And really that journey started with my wife. When we graduated from university, we married, and then we went into the kind of full-time ministry into missions and so forth. And so we spent about 10 years overseas. And then during that time, my wife was really struggling with a lot of challenges, mental health challenges as far as depression, anxiety, and that was kind of getting worse through the years, and to the point where after 10 years we needed to return back home to get more proper care. And then I took up some roles within ministry with our local church and our organization stateside. However, when we came back, this was very challenging, and it got worse and worse to the point after 2 years being home, I needed to leave the ministry to really take care of my wife and our children through this whole process. Now, the long story short is that over this time frame, we tried everything from, you name it, the type of ministry to try to deal with my wife's condition. We went through the mental health process and the system, different medications and therapies, and none of them were working. However, when I left the ministry, it was a very devastating time for my wife, myself, and our children. And what I did is I began to research and look at what is mental illness and go through an understanding what my wife is experiencing. And in that process, I discovered a lot about mental health recovery. I looked at a lot of neuroscience and also started exploring a new way that I felt like in a lot of ways God was showing me something new about himself and in that whole process. And so really a kind of a faith integration with science and mental illness and this mental health recovery process. In that time frame, I also met Dr. Stanford, who at that time was a Baylor University professor of neuroscience and psychology. And through that friendship, he really was able to give me some more deeper understanding. And then another family friend, her name is Buzz Moody, and she has a loved one as well with mental illness. And that between the two of them, I was able to navigate this journey and also what the Lord was showing me personally in my process and the research that I was doing on my own about mental illness. And then that's when I developed a kind of mental health recovery process for my wife. We began this whole new journey. So after about 8 to 10 years of suffering, I started now seeing my wife improve. And over a year and a half, she improved so dramatically that we weaned off most of all those medications down to one, and she got her life back in a way that she can function now. It was very debilitating. And that's been about 8 to 9 years ago, and she's still doing really well to this day. And as a mom, as a wife, as a friend, as a companion with me in this ministry, in this organization. And so from that experience, that's what led us to the Grace Alliance. I met with Dr. Stanford and said, showed him this kind of idea and this vision of how we can help people, because through his research and looking at the church, this was the most difficult place to find help. And that was when the church. They didn't understand the mental health and the faith components together, and then really figuring out how to do this and provide ways that the church could really be helpful through supportive programs and even for the individual to find and discover the hope of mental health recovery.
Well, I praise God that your wife is better, and I appreciate you sharing that story, Joe, and how God has led you and others to establish Grace Alliance. And really part of the reason why I'm doing this interview is because there seems to be some increased awareness of mental health issues, especially within the body of Christ. Strides seemingly are being made, but more need to be done. And but it's an area, like you said, that in the past where the church just for one reason or another just hasn't done a lot on. And that's not a slam by any means, but just these issues are taking more prominence nowadays. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think because you're starting to see much more recognition from people in the church that are going through many mental health challenges themselves and being willing to talk about it. There's still a large number of people that are still shy and don't want to talk about it. But I think we're getting to with technology, the different issues that we're facing, and different ministers who are coming out to basically talk about this from the front are really helping to make a big shift. And I've noticed within about the last 5 or so years, there really has been a shift and an openness in conversation. And I'm starting to see a very helpful dialogue going on within the church. There are still people who are kind of resistant. However, when we talk and I get to share with them, I don't see them resistant. I see them starting to understand and being willing to do more.
So now let's talk more about Grace Alliance and dig deep into what you all do and the curriculum and some of the training you do, the coaching and the mentoring with not just individuals, but also with churches.
First thing that we offer is to provide support. One of the challenges that I found in going through my journey was really finding effective support as far as a support group and really even finding a faith integration. I did reach out to the local communities, but they didn't have faith integration. And even the faith resources that they sent me to were all kind of interfaith, and they all kind of had mixed messages, and it just wasn't something that I could really find comfort in. So going through this process, and then even when going through some of the support groups, they were a little disorganized, and they were really kind of more venting groups, which you walk out of feeling worse than you did going in. At least that was my experience. So, but what we did and what Dr. Stanford and I did was we started to co-author and create a curriculum that was not only from a faith integration, but also evidence-based, meaning that the research shows that these principles will help people find their own recovery from somebody who's living with a mental illness and even with a family member. So what we did is we created this curriculum for a family support group and a peer group for those who are living with a mental illness. And we created these groups so that the church could easily employ within their congregation, and they can start going through these groups, find the healing, find the recovery, find the comfort, find the support that they need as a community, and to see improvement. So that's what we did with those groups. Then we also created a curriculum, which is we call the Thrive Workbook. And that is the journey that I kind of walked through with my wife and helped her through that. And so we just kind of put that into a curriculum, but expanded it way even more beyond that so that we could show the evidence-based principles and things like that within the curriculum to help people. So we developed that so that people could have a tool to walk through that. We used to provide a lot of coaching through that, but now the demand and the need is so overwhelming, we can't service everyone through that. However, the workbook is a great tool that's self-guided for anybody to kind of go through that process. And we have even people that are doing the Thrive Workbook as a group, doing it together. And so we just let them go for it and do that because we know it's helpful for them within that regard. And we also did a lot of research with the support groups, especially with the peers. And we found that in the Living Grace group, that's what we call it, that group, the peer group, found that it reduces symptoms, it aids in overall mental health recovery, and it renews their faith. And we always just say, if your faith is being renewed, it's going to affect your whole life. And we're starting to see that these individuals were actually getting better by going into these groups. And then we also did the same kind of research with the Thrive Workbook and seeing how an individual went through that program and actually, from a very severe situation, 8 months later had significant mental health recovery in their journey and was able to go back into their career. There's a lot of ways that a church can easily and people can easily get around these curriculums and start them in their community, and it will help to provide that place of hope and recovery for many people.
And the really great thing, too, is that all of this is biblically based.
Yes, because the thing is when somebody is in this journey, whether it's a family member or an individual, faith gets really confusing. And this is where it's very hard for a lot of the church or even the pastors. And that's where we come in to try to integrate that with good biblical principles so that the individuals find a loving God, they find the grace that they need, and the rest and the comfort with the community support to actually improve and get better. And I find that many of the Christians that reached out to us, they were also asking, where are the Christian groups? Where are all this material? And there are pockets of things out there, but what we've tried to be is one of those players that we can provide a good curriculum of biblically based, good, Christ-centered, that it can work in any denomination and any church.
That's wonderful. And you mentioned a key word in your talking, Joe. That's the word community. And we really are meant for community. No man or no woman is an island. That's not the way life ought to be lived. And community is really best, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely. You know, when you look at mental health recovery and the research that's out there, even from a secular-based research, they find that in every case that there's somebody who has a significant recovery in their mental illness, community was the common denominator within that process. That just shows the principle of why God created us to live within community. Even from a church standpoint, that takes the burden off of the pastor having to meet one-on-one with all these families and these individuals. But if they had a group that they could walk through together, they understand and have that empathy together. They can build each other up, and that provides that community healing and that recovery for those individuals, whether it's a family member or the individual. It's a beautiful way for the church to really have that mechanism in place. And I can just tell you story and story after how people's lives are being changed just by having a group like this within the church. The community is powerful.
It sure is. Joe, if any of our BBN listeners would like to have more information on Grace Alliance and perhaps one of you all coming to their church, could you give us some contact information, please?
Yeah, the best way to learn about us is through our website, and that's at mentalhealthgracealliance.org. And then just to go through the different pages that we have there that talk about the Family Grace Group, the Living Grace Group, and the Thrive Workbook as well. They can also contact us through our email that we have. It's info@mhgracealliance.org. And again, the email is on the website as well, and they can contact us through the website, and they can follow us on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, and because we post very interesting articles to help with the dialogue as well, and they can engage with us through those channels as well.
Joe, I thank you so much for joining me and joining our BBN listeners on Weekend Connection today. And again, Grace Alliance is not even 10 years old, correct?
Correct. We're only 6 years into it.
And you've seen a lot of growth and a lot of demand for your services during that time.
Yes, we have. We've grown, in these 6 years, we've grown to over 100 groups, mostly in the United States, but they're also in Canada, Australia, and different parts of the world. It's because it's a need everywhere.
It sure is, and increasingly so. And God bless you and strengthen you all in your work there. Thank you very much for joining me today on Weekend Connection.
Thank you.
Once again, that web address is mentalhealthgracealliance.org, and the email address, info@nhgracealliance.org. The phone number is 714-257-5791. Weekend Connection is a public affairs program of the Bible Broadcasting Network.